Hello students, my name is Dr. Alan Mweke from the Department of Animal Health and Production, School of Pure and Applied Sciences. I'm teaching you a course on principles of crop production, that is BAG4102. Therefore, we are talking about, today's topic is on management of plant diseases, but as a recap to what we have done before, I want to remind you that we talked about pathogens that cause plant diseases, and these include fungi, bacteria, viruses, viroids, mycoplasmas or phytoplasmas, and plant parasitic nematodes. So today we want to look at management strategies that are applied to diseases, to manage diseases, so that we can reduce losses or minimize the losses. The principle of disease management is not always elimination. It is always trying to reduce the impact of the infection so that the farmer can harvest something and also be able to reduce the yield losses. Therefore, it's an introduction. I'll take you through the introduction briefly, that we know there are a number of methods applied to control plant disease. They include regulatory, cultural, biological, physical, as well as chemical control. And above all, we have integrated pest management, which covers, combines different approaches. Therefore, in our principles today, we'll go through most of these measures so that you can be able to understand and relate the management to specific pathogens. For example, regulatory control measures, they aim at excluding a pathogen from a host from a certain geographical area, assuming we have a certain plant virus which is not found in Kenya. The only way we can prevent its arrival is through regulation, that is inspection and certification, so that as we import plant materials, including seed, we are sure that we are not introducing a new disease. We know that also most of the cultural methods also aim at helping to appoint plants coming into contact with a pathogen, that is creating an environmental barrier or conditions that are not favorable to the development of the disease. So specifically, we start with control methods that exclude the pathogen from the host. These include quarantine and inspections. We know that in earlier I talked about quarantine and inspection is whereby you subject any plant material that is coming into the country through inspections. And in the inspection, we are looking for the symptoms and the signs of disease or presence of live insects or arthropods like mites. Therefore, when you control the disease, when you do the inspection properly, for example, if you suspect the material has got some disease, you take it for a quarantine for a period of time where you observe the symptoms, and if you do lab testing also, if it turns positive, then probably you destroy that material. If it passes, then you can allow it. So if you do proper quarantine and inspection, you are able, was one of the methods that you can able to control the disease. The organization that is tasked with that purpose, that task in Kenya is called KEPHIS. KEPHIS is Kenya Plant Health Inspection Service that carries out quarantine inspection and certification. Second, another method is crop certification. Under laws of Kenya, there is the Seed and Plant Varieties Act that mandates KEPHIS to be able to inspect all plant materials and certify. Any material sold as seed must meet specific conditions, and those conditions must be that they should be free from pests and diseases. So any material sold as seed under law, KEPHIS is allowed under law to be inspected and ensure that the seed which is being sold to farmers is free from pests and disease. Therefore, crop certification is one of the key methods of management of plant diseases. There are crops which they are started under the law. We have Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 crops. Schedule 1 crops is mandatory to inspect. And these include cereals like the maize, the wheat, and the rest. Then we have Schedule 2, some of them vegetable seed, which is not mandatory to inspect, but is necessary to inspect under the law. So crop certification is very key in terms of management of plant diseases. Then we have techniques that aim at evasion or avoidance of pathogen. How do we prevent pathogen from coming into contact with the plants? That's one technique. So therefore, those techniques include, for example, we know that several diseases will depend on for the disease to occur, the pathogen must come into contact with the plant material. Therefore, you ensure that your plants do not come into contact with the plant, with the pathogens. And this is done through, for example, sanitation, for example, growing in a protected environment like greenhouses and glass houses. By so doing, you can be able to, even including fumigation. There are a number of techniques. I'm not reading, the point is that we are going to, details are being found in the notes, so I'm not going to give you, the classic examples because of time. So one of the ways of evading or avoiding of the pathogen coming into contact with the plants is through use of pathogen-free planting material. I've just talked about seed in the previous slide. Therefore, there are plants which you use plant materials like the cuttings, like the rhizomes to be able to propagate. Therefore, if you use clean planting materials, you avoid the plant coming into contact with. And it's very critical. If you are using clean planting materials, make sure also the environment you are planting, either in the greenhouse or even the field, the soil must be tested so that you don't plant clean planting materials in a contaminated soil, because you'll be defeating the purpose of using plant materials. Then we have said pathogen-free seed. There are a number of seed-borne pathogens, bacteria, fungi, and viruses. Therefore, the purpose again of seed certification to ensure that during seed certification there is inspection and testing in the lab. Therefore, when you use when you do this pathogen-free seed, you are starting from a notch higher, because your seeds are not contaminated and they are clean, and you are able to ensure that you are starting with the plant health, healthy plants. Therefore, it is very important that to know that when you are the seed is being inspected, testing is necessary and is mandatory, and therefore when you buy certified seed, that's why we encourage farmers always to use certified seed, because the certified seed have been tested, they are free from pathogens. But again, I've said it's also good to be aware of your piece of land, your farm. So you start with the clean seed, certified seed, but also ensure you do soil testing. This is critical. We are doing agriculture as a business, because you have serious soil-borne pathogens like bacteria and fungal like the fusarium and bacterial wilt caused by different bacterial species. So if you start with a clean material, but you plant a contaminated soil, then you are defeating the purpose of using of clean disease management. Another method is exclusion of pathogen from plant surfaces by epidermal coatings. One of the ways we have said is that when seed is always treated, is coated with a fungicide. This provides initial protection against soil pathogens and even insect pests immediately after emergence. Therefore, it is very important to use certified seed. Farmers have got the habit of using farmer-saved seed. There is nothing wrong with that. However, the quality and the health of the plants is not guaranteed. Therefore, it's quite important. It's also good to mention that KEPHIS is the regulator of the seed sector industry in Kenya. All the companies must be registered by KEPHIS. All the companies that are growing seed crop must notify KEPHIS, and KEPHIS will do active inspection at the field level. From that, then they'll be able to follow up at the point of packaging, processing and packaging. Then they give a unique number called lot number. Lot number is very critical and very unique for every seed batch. Therefore, when farmers buy the seed, they need to know that you could check for expiry date and also check for the lot number. So if you plant and your seed, you buy seed from a dealer like Agrofet, and the seed have poor germination, please, you are authorized by law to conduct KEPHIS who can now initiate mitigation measures, including but not always compensation from the company or their dealer. So it's very critical that you be able to follow up, use clean planting materials. Then we have control measures or methods that eradicate or reduce pathogen inoculum. Inoculum is a quantity of the pathogen that is causing the disease. There are a number of techniques which can be used to reduce the inoculum on the plant. You have tried to do avoidance, you have tried to do prevention, but eventually the pathogen has come into contact with your plants. Therefore, what do? One approach is to use methods that can be used to control, to reduce the quantity, the amount of inoculum or the amount of the disease-causing organism on the plant. Some of these methods cut across. For example, they include cultural practices. For example, crop rotation and even field sanitation. Field sanitation involves removing crop residues that have been from a previous crop. Rotation means you plant at least different crop species in your farm for at least, take a break of at least 3 years rotation. For example, if you are planting cereals, maybe you can plant vegetables. After that, then you can plant things like the legumes. This benefits the soil not just by reducing inoculum, but also improving soil nutrients. So these methods cut across. They are not really defined as physical, chemical, but one of those methods we have said is some physical methods will depend, for example, heat or cold treatment. Some of the, for example, you are planting bananas, suckers. They can be treated with hot water to reduce or kill the nematodes that are associated with bananas. Cold treatment can also subject to lower heat, lower temperatures that denatures the pathogens or makes it difficult for them to complete their life cycle inside your crop. So that is another method which is very important. Another one is soil treatment. Soil treatment is an effective method, especially for management of soil-borne pathogens like nematodes, bacteria, and the fungi. However, soil treatment is, you can use chemicals, fumigants, like methyl sodium. We used to have a very effective fumigant called Furadan and methyl bromide. But because of health conditions to the users and also the environmental damage they did, they have been withdrawn. Therefore, we have, you can use the chemicals such as methyl sodium and a few others. You can also use heat treatment, especially when you have a small nursery of seedlings. Before you plant, you can inject heat, steam, or boiled water steam, and then that for some minutes. Then when you can cover the soil with a plastic bag, then inject the heat. That also kills both the pathogens and also the weeds as weed seeds. So that's another method that reduces the amount of pathogen, inoculum, that comes into contact with your plants. Another method is host eradication. When you are doing close monitoring of your crops in the field and if you have been inspected, you can destroy the infected plants. To prevent the spread of the disease in your farm. So you reduce the hosts, you destroy them by either uprooting them or plowing them in. But also you can also do additionally you can also use you can also do weeding during the normal weeding process of your crop. I talked about crop rotation, how it is done, so that is quite critical. But please note that for effective crop rotation, to reduce the amount of inoculum, you need to observe crop species. You need to observe the minimum 3 years. One of the challenges you find with the crop rotation is for farmers who have got small pieces of land and they are in intensive production. Somebody has an acre or a quarter of an acre and is growing crops throughout the year. So rotation, for you to rotate for 3 years becomes quite difficult. But for farmers with large tracts of land, you can easily practice crop rotation so that you can be able to be able to reduce amount of disease. It is critical also during crop rotation to observe crops. Don't rotate crops which the same family or which share pathogens. Another method you can use here to reduce the amount of inoculum is also through fallowing. Fallowing is where you leave your land free and cultivate it for a number of years. But however, during fallowing, you need to do weed control because some of the weeds are alternate hosts of some of the pathogens. So fallowing applies, especially where farmers have got long chunks of land. However, you can need to control the weeds. Another method we talked about is sanitation. This also helps at reducing the amount of inoculum come in contact with your plants. Sanitation is aimed at eliminating or reducing the amount of inoculum present in a plant, a field, or a warehouse, and at preventing the spread of the pathogen to the healthy plants and plant products. So this is either you plow in infected plants or you rog and burn or sun dry and use for other purposes. Then we have methods that create unfavorable conditions to the pathogen to be able to multiply. Some of these includes mulching. Use of mulching. When you mulch your piece of land, and this is applicable especially in vegetables, where you have vegetables, smaller piece of land, you can mulch with plastics. This one will control first, it will allow penetration of light, and at some point the soil temperature is elevated, and this controls weeds and other pathogens. Again, depending on the color of the mulch you use the natural plastics. Some of them will be able even to reflect, and to be able to reflect and drive away, repel some of the insect pests. Trap plants, use of trap plants are plants that allow pathogen to invest in them, but they cannot complete their life cycle inside the plants. Therefore, you plow, and this is very practical with the nematodes, plant parasitic nematodes, especially the root knot nematodes. You plant crops that are known to be infested, but they don't support full development of the nematodes in them. So you plant them, the nematodes will hatch, invest the plants, and then you destroy the crops. They will not be able to complete their life cycle. So that is very quite critical, and you need to identify each nematode species have different trap crops. Example, some of the trap crops, for example, for root knot nematodes are sorghum. If you plant sorghum, the nematodes will invest, and then after some time they will not be able to complete their life cycle. However, one of the challenges we find with these approaches is because where farmers are growing vegetables are high value crops. So you tell a farmer to rotate production of tomatoes or potatoes with the sorghum, maybe they will not accept, because the sorghum is a low value crop. They will not be able to get much from it. Therefore, you design a good strategy that is also acceptable to farmers, putting into consideration their needs as for income generation. Then we have biological control methods, which is quite critical. The methods we use as biological control will depend on that is biological control methods. You use living organisms to control other living organisms. There are certain fungi like trichoderma, which are being used to control insects, pests, and also other nematodes. Therefore, use of biological control methods, you use living organisms that are able to multiply in other living organisms, and they cause disease within them or prevent them from multiplication. There are classical examples of some of the, I've given an example of trichoderma species, which is very important in control of fungi. For example, Fusarium oxysporum, which causes disease, especially in some of the Solanaceae family. So it is quite important to observe the biological control. Success, however, with the biological control systems is very slow. It's painfully slow, so you need to be patient. You are not going to get a knockdown or immediate control effect. So it is successful, but it is slow. So you need to observe that. As we soldier on, we want to control, we talked about controlling through trap plants, and I've just explained. There's a slide here explains some of the techniques used, so I'm not going to go through one by one. You get the notes. But the principle is that the trap plants enable the insect, the pathogens to infest them, but they don't complete and support their completion of the life cycle. So it is, and this is quite very much applicable in plant parasitic nematodes. Very, very, very important. Then we have methods that aims at reducing amount of pathogen inoculum through antagonistic microorganisms. This is again a method of biological control where you use antagonistic pathogens that compete, microorganisms that compete with the pathogen. So for space and also for nutrition. So when that is done, then you can be sure that the microorganism, antagonistic microorganism you are going to use must be more competitive, must be able to outcompete the pathogen. There are a number of them which have even been commercialized as commercial products, and they are available. And again, the principle here is microparasitism. They parasitize the microorganisms that are causing plant diseases and eventually kill them. Example I gave earlier of trichoderma is one of those pathogens that are known to parasitize other microorganisms. All right, let's talk about chemical control. Chemical control is the most popular, most accessible, and the widely used methods of control of plant diseases, simply because there are millions, there are hundreds of chemicals that have been registered for use. They are easy to apply and they are affordable. However, we need to understand that chemical use has got associated shortcomings, especially poisoning. For example, they can poison the people, they can spoil the environment like water points and the soil. Therefore, it is very important to use chemicals. Judicious use of chemicals is advocated. Do not just use chemicals for the sake of use them. You need to use the chemical for the right pathogen. You need to observe the guidelines in terms of safe use of pesticides. You need to observe pre-harvest intervals after you spray. Some will tell you when you spray towards or during harvesting, then you need to observe. You don't harvest, spray chemicals today and harvest tomorrow. It's quite critical. So some of the chemicals we use include the soil fumigants, which I mentioned before. We also chemicals used for deforestation of warehouses, especially for harvested crop to prevent post-harvest losses. Then we have chemicals that are being used for sanitization, to sanitize, to prevent when people are working on the plants, they can be able to mechanically transfer some of the pathogens like bacteria and fungi. So when you are working from one portion of the field, before you move to another, you need to sanitize your tools and your hands also to prevent spread of the disease. The other one is use of chemicals to control insect vectors that spread diseases, especially the viruses. Viruses, they don't have no capacity to move from one plant to another on their own, but they are spread through insect vectors. So it's quite critical. So like I've said, in soil, you can do soil treatments. I mentioned that about fumigants. Some of them are becoming less and less. Israel is the highest producer of methyl bromide. But due to concern on its effect on the ozone layer, which protects us from some of the sunny rays, the harmful ones, it has been discontinued. But a few countries still continue to use it. In Kenya, you can only use it for fumigation of, for example, stored grains. And you need a license to import it, and you need to explain how it is used, and it's monitored. Therefore, fumigation is quite critical. However, you can use phosphine gas, again, is not, which is also effective, but not as effective as the previous fumigants, which have been banned. Therefore, you use that principle. Then we have something called use of plant resistance, host plant resistance. What happens is breeders sometimes breed plants. The principle of plant breeding is to increase yields. first and foremost. The second one would be desirable characters like OC resistance. The plants could be bred for resistance against plant diseases and pathogens. Like there are a number of tomato plants that have been bred for resistance against root knot nematodes. Therefore, host plant resistance is quite easy because one, you don't need skills. You just buy seed and a plant because they have been bred for resistance against specific pests. However, the challenge we have with resistant host resistance is because it is difficult to infuse to develop resistance against a number of pathogens. So resistance is bred for a specific pathogen, and where it's applicable, then you can plant your crops and you can be sure that they will resist. You use minimum chemicals to prevent, to reduce losses. However, the other challenge with host resistance is because it breaks down over time, especially when it's subjected to different races and species from different geographical areas. Sometimes it's known to break down, but it is nevertheless quite useful. So resistant varieties have been bred. We have wheat varieties that are resistant to wheat rust. We have tomatoes that are resistant to nematodes and Phytophthora invertans, that is bacteria, the leaf blight. We also have in plant resistance, the latest technology is use of genetically modified crops, whereby a gene is infused to the plants to resist a pathogen. One of the examples we have BT cotton now in Kenya, which is being bred to breed against the bollworm, one of the biggest pests of cotton, and it has been allowed now to be grown by farmers. I think at the stage of seed bulking and multiplication before farmers can produce it. The other use is, I've mentioned about transgenic plants. Either you can transgenic plants are the GM plants, genetically modified. Either there are those which have been modified to resist biotic factor, to be able to tolerate, not to resist, tolerate a biotic factor like heat, like salinity and the rest. Then there are those which have been infused with a gene that can be able to resist produce mycotoxins. Like the way the GM cotton works is because when you invest, when you GM cotton, GM crops like cotton, they're infused with a gene from bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, and when the biting insects like the bollworms come and feed on it, the bacteria produces toxins in the stomach of the pest, then it dies. So that's how it works. Then we have use of chemicals. We have different types of chemicals. Yes, we have contact pesticides. Then we have systemic pesticides. It is always undivisible. At early stages, you can use systemic chemicals to have a long-term protection against pests and diseases. However, towards harvesting, you need to use softer chemicals like contact ones with the short pre-harvest intervals, so that you don't consume, don't feed farmers and consume yourself don't consume pesticides which are residues inside the plants. Therefore, it is advisable to always know at which stage of crop which chemical to use, because we have because health is critical, and the use of chemicals is also, I said, is quite important. However, we need to observe certain regulations. For example, we need to know to observe post-harvest intervals, especially for crops that have been the ones we are consuming without cooking, like the fresh vegetables, is important. The only shortcoming here is that we have very good standards for crops that we export, like French beans. But what we consume locally, there isn't much, but I know the government is developing a local standard for monitoring pesticides. And I think it's going to pesticide levels on harvest crops, and I think that is going to play a key role. One of the challenges I said is chemicals, plants, pathogens become resistant to chemicals over time. Therefore, it's quite important. Chemicals also kill other, they also kill non-target beneficial organisms that help in the prevention of the disease. So that is also quite critical. So it is very important to know how to manage the chemicals. The plant, the plants. All this discussion has been about pathogens. The next lecture would be a talk about management of plant pests. That is insect pests and pathogen and arthropods. So I want to thank you, my team, for listening and being able to follow our lecture. And I hope I've been able to deliver my message with clarity. Thank you.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.